hard to say the same thing.
What's up guys, my name is Nicole and I like to do fashion DIYs, and in today's video I'm going to show you how I made this top. Not only is it super cute from the front, there's also a lot going on in the back as well. So today's video is going to be how I created this. This top was inspired by something I found on Reformation, as always, one of my favorite places to browse on the internet. And once I saw something like this, I really wanted to recreate it, so I thought I would take a whack at it, and it honestly turned out super cute. Since I've had nothing but time on my hands, I kind of went above and beyond with this top, and I lined it and added boning, which is not what the original top has, but I figured why not. So if you want to also add lining and boning, you can, or you can just skip those parts and do the top without the lining. If you want to see how I created this top, then please keep on watching. To make this top, I'm going to start off with my favorite thing to rework, a men's dress shirt. Thanks Dad for letting me cut up your shirts. Before I get started, I check to see what thread options I have, and the thread that I have on hand isn't the ideal color. It's a little too light, but we're just going to work with it. To start, I am going to draft my pattern. To do this, I'm actually using this bustier style top that I made years ago. The construction of it is very similar to what I'm looking for, so I'm just going to use this as a guide. To do that, I need to trace around each individual section, then add my 1/2 inch seam allowance. For the side bodice pattern piece, I taped an extra inch to make up the difference from the amount I cut off and taped it together. Then I proceeded to do the same thing to the back 2 bodice pieces. I removed approximately 2.5 inches from the top of the back pieces since I will be attaching straps. To finish the last bodice piece, I'm going to extend it much longer because I'm going to be adding shirring to this piece for a more comfortable fit. I included the buttons on the pattern piece even though I am going to be attaching this shirt's existing placket. Next, I drafted the pattern for the strap and the back. For the measurements, I stuck with 15 inches in length and 3 inches in width, angling one end for a tapered finish. Looking back now, I probably should have made this strap a few inches longer, but something to consider depending on how you like to tie your tie. Then I went around and added a 1/2 inch seam allowance before cutting. So now I have one large piece that I will sew together instead of 2 separate pieces. And the last pattern I need to draft is for the sleeves. To do this, I am just going to use these sleeves I have from another project laying around. I started with drawing a straight line to mark my middle. I folded my sleeve in half and carefully traced each half of the sleeve onto my paper. Then I went back with my ruler and S-curve to clean up the lines. I then made my sleeve 3 inches in length. Okay, so apparently I didn't get the footage of getting to this point, so what I did was cut my sleeve pattern piece out, and I cut 7 slits almost all the way down to the base of the pattern piece and taped it down with equal distance between each slit. This will give me the volume I am looking for in my sleeves, and then carefully removed the taped pattern piece and then cut it out. Before moving on to cutting out your pattern pieces, be sure to remove any darts within the dress shirt to ensure you are maximizing all the fabric you have. Then it's time to deconstruct the shirt. So I now have separated the back, both front sides, the sleeves, and the collar. Starting with the sleeves, I am going to remove the cuffs. Then to maximize my sleeve length, I am going to seam rip down the side seams instead of cutting it so I can preserve that extra bit of fabric in the seam allowance. Once seam ripping was complete, I pressed the seams flat and proceeded to press all my pieces down and removed any wrinkles or pleats. Now it's time to assemble all the pieces onto the shirt and make sure I have enough space to cut out every piece. I used the back to lay out all the bodice pieces, and I used the sleeves to cut out my cap sleeves. Then I used the front sides to cut both of my straps out on the fold. Once everything is cut, I have 2 straps, 2 sleeves, 1 center front, 2 side bodices, 2 back side pieces, and 2 center back pieces. I'm going to be adding a lining, but this step is totally optional. The original version is unlined, and I figured I have the time and supplies, so why not? I'm going to start with attaching both of the bodice side pieces to the bodice front. Actually, before I start, I ran my serger along the raw edges, but a zigzag stitch could also give the same effect. This part is totally optional, especially if you were choosing to line it. Once they were sewn in place, I took my side back pieces, serged the raw edges, and attached to the bodice, pressing my seams open as I go. Then I went ahead and did the same steps to the lining. Now I have something that looks like this. And because I figured why not, I decided to add some boning to give this top more structure and support. Again, this is totally optional and not necessary for the top at all. I measured out how much I needed. In total, I used 4 pieces of boning. Once it was cut to size, I pushed the plastic ends out and trim them down so they have no sharp edges and also short enough that I can now sew either end shut. Then pinned with the curve of my boning facing me on the wrong side of the lining. This way it will sit nicer against the body. Then sewed a straight stitch to secure each piece of boning. Once the lining was complete, it was time to attach it to the outer fabric. To do that, we are just going to pin with right sides together, matching up all the seams before sewing a straight stitch along the top. And then I will also stitch along the bottom as well. I'm also going to make a few clips to the corners to make it lay flat once it's turned right side out. Now we are going to move on to the sleeves. Just like my other pieces, I serged the raw edges before starting, then folded right sides together and pinned before sewing. Since I am going to be adding elastic to both ends of the sleeves, I'm going to sew a 1/2 inch channel that I can feed my elastic through. Once both ends were pinned, it was time to sew. I then measured out how much elastic I needed, secured a safety pin to one end of the elastic before feeding it through the channel. Don't forget to secure the loose end of the elastic with a pin to the shirt so it doesn't get lost inside. Once I feed it through the whole way, I pin my elastic together to secure it until I sew. Then I will fold over the raw edge and use a straight stitch to keep it in place. I repeated the same process on both ends and for both sleeves. Now I am moving on to the tie and the back. I am going to pin right sides together and sew 2 of the open seams shut. Once they've been sewn, I flip them right side out and press flat. Okay, moving back to the bodice, I am going to finish up with the center back. This is the back panel that will have shirring. In order to shear, you will need some elastic thread. You will be wrapping the elastic thread around the bobbin by hand before putting it into the machine. If you'd like to see a more detailed process of how shearing is achieved, I will link a video where I go more in depth on the process. Once the shearing is complete, it will look something like this. I am now going to attach these panels to the rest of the bodice, pinning right sides together before sewing into place. Next, I'm going to attach the straps. It just slides in nicely and I will secure it with the top stitch. Once the straps were sewn, it was time to move on to the back closure. Since this was originally a men's dress shirt, I'm going to make use of the placket and attach it to my shirt so it can be functional. I measured out the desired length that I needed and added 1/2 inch to both ends for seam allowance, before cutting it out and repeating the same process on the other side. Then I just trimmed down my seam allowance a bit before attaching the placket to the bodice. I tried it on to see where I needed to place it. Once I laid it out, I could see how much I would need to take off of each side. I then folded up each raw hem until it was flush with the shirt, then sewed everything to keep it in place, and repeated the same process to the other side. Since only one buttonhole made it onto my shirt, I had to add 2 more buttonholes using my buttonhole function on my machine. To cut them open, I just take 2 pins and pin it to either side of my buttonhole and use my seam ripper to cut the hole open. I then hand stitch the buttons to the other side. At this point, I double check to see if it fits okay before I trim off the excess shearing panel. And now for the last and final step, I just attach the sleeves, securing about 2 inches on the top edge using the side seams as a reference. And once the sleeves were attached, it was done.
Good girls go to heaven, and bad girls go everywhere. And tonight I'ma love you, and tomorrow you won't care.
Thank you guys so much for watching. If you would like to see more fashion DIY content, please subscribe and give this video a thumbs up so I know you liked it. And I will catch you in the next one. Bye!